Dynamic Seminars, the management and training consultancy presents Southern Africa's leading success lecturers.
Right, everybody, well, welcome to the program this morning on the core skills behind achieving leaderships for result. The whole idea behind this is that we make it as interactive as we possibly can, and that we go away from here with some real skills that we can actually use and utilize once we are back in the workplace. The program does not only deal with leadership in terms of what a leader does, but it also deals with who a leader actually is. And so the components that we're going to focus on is we're going to look at who and what the leader within an organization or within a community and in society, who that person actually is, what are the qualities, what are the disciplines, and particularly within the organization, what sort of role does the individual play when that individual has that role of leader. So different aspects of leadership we're going to look at to start with. Then I'm going to take you through some very interesting studies into neuroscience, which is the biology of the brain. And this is the latest studies with regards to leadership. We're also going to do a bit of leadership troubleshooting. That once the organization is faced with some of the aspects and elements that they're faced with on a day-to-day basis, what role and what function does the leader actually perform? And then we'll end off the program today talking about the very specific qualities that leaders do actually need to bring to the workplace. Our starting point in terms of each of this is really to look at a definition of leadership. Now, in terms of the information over here, by all means, if your way of learning is to make notes, go ahead and do so. But the presentation will be sent to you today. The presentation will be sent to you, maybe just without the pictures, but that's all right as long as we actually have the information. There must be many definitions of leadership, and I suppose once we read articles or books about leadership, we'll come across a definition that works for us. And I'm applying this definition throughout the program for very specific reasons. The most specific reason is I'd like us to be all on the same page. And if we can work from the same page or from the same frame of reference, well, then we'll actually see where this program is going and what the learnings can be for each of us. During the course of the last 2 years, I've had an absolute fascination with reading books about talent. And amongst the authors that I've quite enjoyed reading have been Malcolm Gladwell, and an individual who writes the book called Bounce, whose name is Matthew Syed. Matthew Syed has researched leadership throughout the world, but in particular from the perspective of the highest achievers. Matthew Syed's book, Bounce, tells his story. He was an Olympics and Commonwealth table tennis champion. And he also then happened to be studying industrial and behavioral psychology, but he looked at where does talent come from? What makes somebody stand out? Now let's put this into perspective. Matthew Syed, as a table tennis player, would stand 7 to 8 meters away from his opponent. The ball would travel, I'm told, at up to speeds of 200 kilometers an hour. Matthew Syed was known throughout table tennis history as having amongst the fastest reflexes of any table tennis player. But there was an interesting thing that Matthew Syed did. He had as a best friend the German tennis player Michael Stich. He went to Michael Stich, he said, look, I'm a bit of a social tennis player, but what I want you to do is I want you to serve your ball to me the hardest that you possibly could. So we're talking about somebody serving the ball at 240 k's away, at 240 kilometers an hour, but standing maybe 40 meters away. Michael Stich duly served the ball to him. He could not even react to one. Yet here was a man who's standing at someone 7 meters away from someone, across a table tennis table, could react to a ball coming at 200 kilometers an hour, but at 40 meters away could not react to a ball coming at 240 kilometers an hour. Why? Because Syed spoke about the following. He spoke about something called patterns. He says what sets the rest apart from the absolute best is the best become aware of the patterns that precede the actual action. So if we think of it in terms of tennis, why it is that tennis players can react to balls, for instance, coming at 240, 270 kilometers an hour, is not because they are reacting to the ball coming off the racket from their opponent, but they are reacting to the patterns that precede the ball actually being struck by their opponent. And this is the premise behind which Syed works, and which an author like Malcolm Gladwell also writes his books. They talk about, where does ability come from? Is ability innate? Are we born with ability? Do we develop ability? Is ability part of genetics? Is ability part of environment? The simple answer to all of this is that it is all of that, but really none of that. But what it is, that ability is nurtured via the nature of the individual. Simply put, ability develops through nurturing it via the type of individual that you're working with. So what type of individual are we talking about over here? What type of individual stands out from the rest? Well, the type of individual who stands out from the rest is the type of individual who actually wants to. In other words, they have an inclination, they have a leaning towards it. In his book, Gladwell talks about something which he calls the 10,000 hour principle, or the 10-year principle. And he says that what these